Hello, in this broadcast, the news from the television company Ostankino. The basic topic remains the situation in Chechnya. Today we received an urgent telegram from TASS saying that units of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Ministry of Defense of Russia were assigned the objective to blockade Grozny. Later, from sources of information accessible to us, we learned that on access routes to Grozny, clashes continue. The group of Russian forces moving from the north toward the Chechnya capital was detained by Dudayev regiments near the Pervomaiska Cossack village. There, an intense exchange of artillery missile blows occurred. Reports on casualties are contradictory. One of the Russian columns moving from the direction of Ingushetia was stopped today at the river Sunja because the bridge there had been blown up. As darkness fell, the advance of units had stopped. According to the press service of the government of Russia, in the night hours, the units of internal forces of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Ministry of Defense were ordered to conduct rotating combat patrol through the area of populous areas and roads and set up a checkpoint passing system. And the most important is to curtail possible provocations and armed attacks. Meanwhile, in Vladikavkaz, talks today continued between the task commission of the Russian government and the delegation of official Grozny. Judging from everything, they are proceeding with difficulty. Talks on regularizing the situation in Chechnya are proceeding with difficulty. Today, they began 1.5 hours late. Currently, in the arts building of Vladikavkaz, the delegations of Moscow and official Grozny, after a break, are again discussing a package of 5 decisions, which can only be adopted altogether. The issues are peaceful termination of bloodshed, disarming the population and unlawful groups, together with withdrawing forces, and the possibility of holding free elections in Chechnya. The basic disputes are evoked by the disarmament issue. The Russian delegation firmly stands on constitutional positions and insists on the immediate disarmament of the population and unlawful groups, simultaneously with withdrawal of forces. The Chechnya side, however, is demanding initial withdrawal of troops located currently 15 kilometers from Grozny, and only then will agree to discuss disarmament. The Chechen delegation doesn't wish to discuss the problem of its position vis-à-vis the Russian constitution. Certain political analysts presume that in this period of time, Jahar Dudayev faces the dilemma either to begin a guerrilla war or to step down from power. On the basis of this analysis, the conclusion is drawn that Dudayev is attempting to kill time with dialogues and change circumstances to his own benefit. Today from Grozny, we received documenting material with the tape of the voice of Jahar Dudayev. I can give operational facts on the composition of these groups, how many and where, and proportionally how they will be moving and where they will approach from the rear. From the rear, it's good to blast them. That's the old tactic of the mountain people. Attack, retreat. Attack, retreat. To wear them out until they themselves, from fear and shock, will die like dogs. Advance, retreat. Advance, retreat. Advance, retreat. In Dagestan, 40 of the 59 Russian military servicemen were released who had been taken hostage, and today the government of the Dagestan Republic refuted reports in mass media about the movement of troops into Chechnya from Dagestan territory and the existence of insurrectionists to counteract Russian troops. Russian forces in Chechnya are ordered to restore constitutional order, facilitate economic, political stability in the region. This was stated at a meeting with the chairman of the temporary council, Umar Abdulkhanov, in the village Znamenskaya by a representative of the president in Chechnya, Nikolai Yegorov. Participating in the meeting were the elders of the Naterich region, who unanimously supported the deployment of troops in Chechnya. They entreated the Russian side not to make any compromises with official Grozny. At night, units of the Ministry of Defense and the internal forces launched an attack in the direction of the capital of Chechnya. Dudayev's gunmen used a covering force consisting of live people, predominantly women, in order to impede the advance of the troops. According to Nikolai Yegorov, Grozny will be encircled in the immediate future, after which the bloodshed will only be stopped by the capitulation of Dudayev forces. I just received a news report from the representative of the Temporary Information Center in Mozdok. It says that the units of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Ministry of Defense of Russia have successfully forced the crossing of the Terik River and are 15 to 20 kilometers north of the capital, Grozny. Units which have come through Ingushetia are in the area of Novashara on the territory of Chechnya. The border between Dagestan and Chechnya is fully blockaded. And today we managed to clarify the position of the Prime Minister of Russia on events in Chechnya. He gave an exclusive interview to our correspondent, Natalia Chernyshova, from our television information agency. Was the decision adopted consciously? That is, did you prepare to make this decision? Absolutely. Then why is there a sense that the soldiers feel somehow uncertain in Chechnya? There are many known cases of surrender of our soldiers, and there's some sort of a suspended state. No, I would not say that. The uncertainty is that they are on the territory of their own country. You understand, this is the territory of Russia. And today, the soldiers are having to deal with the people because women are placed on the front lines. Tell me, where have you ever seen that before? They're putting women and children in the front. Women and children. And what do you think? In the shoes of a soldier or a military man today, what should he do? Barge into the crowd? The leaders must understand that they will answer for this, for all these deeds. All leaders of any rank will answer. Viktor Stepanovich, how do you assess the fact that the majority of parties and democratic movements have spoken out against the entry or blockade of Chechnya? I view this negatively, simply negatively. I think that they are concerned not with Chechnya. Their concern today is not for Chechnya, but for themselves. That is their main concern. And what are they offering? Have you heard any proposals from them? Maybe they've said something. Maybe they know how to liquidate this conflict by dialogues. Dialogues? 3 years. 3 years have passed. And why did they not begin 3 years ago and couldn't when there were only 18 people headed by Dudaev? And why not then? These people were in power. And why did they do nothing when it was in the fetal stage? What dialogues? And with whom will there be dialogues? And why now have they all jumped into this? And what are they offering? Have you heard any realistic proposals from them? Incidentally, I must tell you that some of them, they're not against what the government is doing or what the president has done today because it all is in compliance with the Constitution. They are not against it, but they don't say it there. Oh, they say over the telephone that they're not against it, but when they crawl up to the podium, then they suddenly change their tune. So you ask them, these Democrats, and why did they take on this responsibility that they are the defenders of democracy? And whom do I defend? And hundreds of millions of Russians today want democracy, and they live by democracy. So why then does someone assume this right today? According to what right? There's no sense in merely playing democracy. The full interview of the Premier you'll see after the program, and at the meeting of the State Commission on Operational Matters today, the discussion was about how much money Russia can allot to restore the economy in the Chechnya Republic. At the session of the Commission, discussions were held by the representatives of ministries and departments. Their objective is to restore the virtually collapsed economy of Chechnya, provide necessary aid to residents of the Republic. The scale of the problem is enormous. The first Vice Premier, Alexis Kovets, quoted the following figures. The gross national revenue has decreased by more than 70%. Manufacturing of foods and industrial goods is halved. It's planned to deliver food to Chechnya to begin restorational work on priority life-sustaining of objects and organize payments of pensions and social subsidies. The overall expenditures will comprise around 1 trillion rubles. The head of the Government Commission on Operational Issues, Alexis Kovets, did not conceal anxiety on how difficult the work will be in circumstances of resistance. He stated to journalists at an improvised press conference upon the end of the meeting An armed resistance is underway, unfortunately. In this case, some losses are unavoidable. Undoubtedly, in those regions where order is restored, the Russian government will do everything to provide aid to the population. Even today, efforts are being undertaken by the Ministry of Internal Affairs to provide for the safety of industrial objects. This was stated at a meeting by the First Deputy Minister, Mikhail Yegorov. On protecting objects, I can say the following, that at certain stations, in principle, to enable somehow future work, we are supplying certain protective measures. Prior to the beginning of the session of the State Duma, a statement was distributed today by the faction Russia's Choice, where Yegor Gaida stated that in the event that the question of impeaching the president is raised, Russia's Choice will not support it. And on behalf of the chairman of the party, the Democratic Choice of Russia, Oleg Boyko, it stated that events of the last days are a vehicle for certain political forces to force their own scenario of what's occurring and recruit support for another campaign to slander the president of the country and its government, with which, naturally, the Democratic Choice does not agree. The State Duma did eventually have a session today and recognized the work of the federal organs of state rule on the political regularization of the volatile situation in Chechnya as unsatisfactory. Voting in favor of this decision after lengthy and heated discussion were 288 deputies. Two resolutions, for the discussion of which the Duma convened today, were adopted literally in the last half hour. The entire time prior to that, deputies clarified each other's positions, often reiterating what was already said. Again, proposals were heard to withdraw troops from Chechnya, about the resignation of not only force ministers, but the entire cabinet. The number of supporters of the military methods in resolving the conflict among deputies did not increase. As previously, they are buddies Fyodorov, Sergei Baburin, Nikolai Lysenko, and the LDPR faction. The Duma, by majority vote, adopted the resolution on amnesty for participants in the conflict who voluntarily relinquish weapons. Apart from recognizing the work of state organs as extremely unsatisfactory, deputies instructed their committees to prepare a proposal to make amendments to the Constitution which establish parliamentary control over the functioning of executive power. A suggestion was made on peacekeeping actions of deputy factions in Chechnya without corresponding instructions from Duma should be seen as private business of visitors. In its decisions, the Duma bases itself on the premise that Chechnya is an inexorable part of the Russian territory. Respectful colleagues, let's put not a period but an exclamation point on our business. A correspondent of Arguments and Facts managed today to have a brief interview with the President of Russia, who, as you know, is in the Central Clinical Hospital. Boris Yeltsin said that he is feeling well, and naturally to the question regarding the Chechnya crisis, he responded that a big war would not begin, the conflict is not unfolding beyond Chechnya. He called the reaction to these events in other republics in the framework of Russia as relatively calm. For the second day in a row, in the Kremlin, taking turns, our presidential aides holding briefings on the Chechnya crisis, the regulation of which, in the opinion of Vyacheslav Kostikov, demands the consolidation of all branches of rule and democratic forces of Russia. I must state with full responsibility that there is no party for war, neither here in the Kremlin, nor on the Old Square, nor in Russia in general. There is a natural understanding of the fact that in the conditions of democracy, and perhaps maybe even more so in the conditions of democracy, an entire series of problems cannot be resolved without forceful pressure, especially in that complicated transitional stage from totalitarianism to democracy in which Russia is currently. I'll report on attempts of the team of Boris Yeltsin to remove discord on the question of use of force in Chechnya with opponents from the Democratic camp. The member of the Presidential Advisory, Emil Pine, at the same time emphasized that the storming of Grozny unavoidably will lead to a historical drama with the saddest consequences. Hope that it will be possible to avoid major clashes was expressed also by Dmitry Rurikov, who told the press that the Kremlin has no problem with the reaction of the international public opinion to Chechnya, which, as the presidential aide noted, is based on the fact that Moscow is involved in regularizing an internal issue. And this is truly confirmed by news from abroad. The chairman of the European Commission, Jacques Delors, does not feel that the latest events in Chechnya are evidence of Moscow striving to restore the former USSR. He said that this is an internal affair of Russia, which contains about 20 autonomous republics. In Delors' opinion, as previously, there is hope that everything will end at the dialogue tables. Politicians in the West continue to give cautious assessments of the situation in Chechnya. However, mass media is not so restraint and issue a string of commentary. Many are observing the situation from a distance and are attempting to guess how events will unfold and how everything will end. The predictions are the most diverse, but all agree on one thing: Chechnya is a part of Russia. The London Times writes that in the last years, Chechnya was a haven for plane hijackers and criminals, in a word, a living reproach toward President Yeltsin in his attempt to create a lawful Russian state. The New York Times feels that if Moscow did not take a decisive action regarding Chechnya, then idleness could have contributed to similar uprisings in other regions, and in the political plan, this would put the trump card in the hand of the right nationalists. However, apart from political aspects, observers don't neglect the economy. In their opinion, the loss of influence in this oil-rich region would be an undoubted economic failure for Russia. Many are striving into the area currently, and does this comply with Russia's interests as a whole country? A natural attention to the situation in Chechnya is being paid by the countries of the Islamic world. Today in Casablanca, leaders of the Islamic states convened. Probably at that meeting, the question will be raised about Chechnya, since Jahar Dudayev already has approached the Islamic Conference countries for aid. However, not one country has responded to his appeal yet, because almost every large Islamic country has its own internal problems with religious and ethnic minorities. There are territorial disputes and separatist sentiments. Everything is familiar here, just as quite severe methods to quell uprisings. It's unlikely that someone will openly attempt to inspire a new rebellious war in that region. One shouldn't throw rocks when one is in a glass house. And again, I will bring you back to Russian statements. Today in the studio, constantly new reports are being received. The statement of the Temporary Informational Center of the Government of Russia, I read. In the last days on radio, in newspapers and on television broadcasts, statements of political activists have appeared of various levels and caliber regarding events in the Chechnya Republic. Some of them contain completely impermissible, in tone and content, assessments of the actions of the President and Government of Russia on resolving the crisis. In a situation of constantly escalating hysteria, an attempt is being made to stage a model burial ceremony for the young Russian democracy. The actions of the President and Government of Russia are seen as the only ones possible to prevent the collapse of the Federation and return the life of the multinational Chechnya onto a normal track. And we continue our program. In Moscow, a conference, Women and the Development of Russia, is underway. Strange people, these women. A triumphant concert, not after the completion of the conference, but before, incidentally after as well. Although if one takes the dry remainder from all statistics contained in the National Report on the Russian Federation for the 4th World Conference on the Position of Women, one has nothing left to do but sing. The transitional economy in the current phase has worsened the position of women. Unemployment is ours by 70%, poverty as well, because half of all employed women, and women comprise more than half of the workforce, are single mothers. Matters are no better with access to higher echelons of power. The new parliament is 11.4% women, almost the same number of the decision-making level. As the Minister of Social Security, Lyudmila Bezlepkina, said, the average percentage of women in higher echelons of power in developed countries is around 35%. All these facts were cited as necessary components for the future report at the Beijing conference in September of 1995. There, paths will be developed for joint coordinated decisions pursuing equality, development, and peace. At the Russian conference, which will last for 2 days, the national platform of action will be discussed to abolish all forms of discrimination. Participating in the conference was the chairman of the government, Viktor Chernomyrdin. Women are more actively pursuing major political orbits, and yet women remain women. And they'll probably be interested in the next report of our broadcast, a half-century anniversary celebrated by an institute. At these doors, thousands of little humans who were just born for the first time breathe fresh air. To help a child be born, in this brief phrase, is the entire meaning of the difficult daily work of the staff of the Scientific Center of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Perinatology of the Russian Academy of Medical Sciences. But to help a child be born doesn't just mean to deliver the baby, but overcome those various pathological processes and complications which hamper birth. And here, future mothers are brought in who have complications. Even on the day of the 50th anniversary, currently, a very complex operation is underway, which was needed suddenly. A woman was brought in with severe hemorrhaging. But treatment practice is only one small component of the center's work. Here, science research is conducted and new methods are developed, and specialists are trained for the rest of the clinics and obstetrical facilities, so the center helps people be born hundreds and thousands of kilometers away. And again, unfortunately, politics. In Kiev, talks began today between the government delegations of Ukraine and Russia. The dialogues are being held behind closed doors, but as a correspondent of ITER TASS learned from Ukrainian government sources, the most serious problem remains the question of the Black Sea Fleet. The Russian delegation feels it's indispensable to continue to base the fleet in Crimea with its main base in Sevastopol and excludes the possibility of joint stationing there of the Black Sea Fleet and the naval force of Ukraine. The Ukrainian side submits new proposals, so evidently the talks are being protracted. Today, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine has confirmed measures to stabilize the social and economic situation in Crimea. And in Belarus, at a conference of the Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, they spoke of the need to restore business ties, the severing of which dealt a strongly felt blow to all the republics of the former Soviet Union. The meeting of the industrialists and entrepreneurs of Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine, which was underway in Minsk, was dedicated to developing a concept for future reintegration, which, according to the participants of the meeting, is the only possible way to revive the industry. The severing in domestic business ties, this is an abnormality which we acquired as a result of the sovereignties, and it cannot continue further. Because the entire issue is that we have established, in the framework of the Union of Industrialists, 512 ties. This is not much. There are thousands, tens of thousands, but already we're happy with this, and we will continue to restore further. At the meeting of industrialists, an agreement was signed to create a transnational corporations and financial industrial groups, and also an agreement on interaction among the unions of industrialists with an invitation to Kazakhstan to become a participant in the process of joint strengthening the overall industrial potential. News from abroad. In the Moroccan city Casablanca, the meeting of the ministers of foreign affairs of the member countries of the Islamic Conference has ended. In the summary declaration, an appeal is made to Muslim countries to provide Bosnia with multilateral political, material, and diplomatic support in order to restore the just rights of the Bosnian population. As a result of shooting in Bosnia, 4 Bangladeshi soldiers from the UN forces have been injured. The shooting originated from a position west of the city Velika Kladuša. That's the location of the forces of the Krajina Serbs and the Muslim autonomists. The Supreme Court of Brazil has acquitted the former president, Fernando Collor, who was accused of corruption. The investigation could not produce a single document confirming that the former head of state used funds derived through extortion or blackmail. A powerful explosion occurred today in one of the central areas of Istanbul next to a mosque. According to preliminary reports, there are casualties and injuries. The explosive device was planted in an automobile containing religious literature. Security services don't exclude that the terrorists themselves were also victims of the explosion. For the first time in Paris, my exhibit is under the Russian flag, and for me this is very pleasant. The natural satisfaction of Mikhail Shemyakin in full measure was shared by organizers of the exhibit of his painting and sculptural works, and the Russian-speaking in France, and a multitude of guests who attended its opening. Almost 100 works of the famous Russian artist and sculptor presented by the Parisian Carpentier Gallery reflect various stages and directions in the multifaceted work of the master who, in 1971, was exiled from his homeland. A series of paintings in the spirit of Picasso with the portrait of his daughter Paloma seems to guide the viewer into a world he discovered of surrealism and the fantastic. In his new plastic expression, Mikhail Shemyakin created a gallery of images from players, bourgeois, masters of intrigue from the past and current centuries. An extensive series dedicated to the life of Rembrandt is represented at the gallery by some of the more expressive works of the artist. Sculpture is subjected to different laws. The painter approached it slowly, but by achieving it, he proved his artistic ripeness. Currently, I'm beginning to work on a monument for the fellows who died in Afghanistan. The monument is being made for Moscow, and for me, This is one of the most serious, complicated, and responsible works and objectives which I will attempt to execute with honor. And again, Moscow. According to the Central Department of the Traffic Patrol, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, in Russia, fewer cars are being hijacked, but most likely because, as always, unexpected snowfall complicates movement through capital streets. Much agility and determination was needed by Muscovites to get to work in the morning and return home in the evening. Because of the abundant snowfall, almost all road traffic was on the verge of standstill. Our program was deprived of several important reports because film crews could not reach the site of occurrence on time. It was especially difficult for those using the metro. On steep, uncleared staircases, people behaved differently. Some crawled, clenching their teeth, some scolded city authorities, and others almost seriously regretted that they hadn't taken their sleds with them. And how many bruises and broken bones were there in Moscow today, we could not find out. First aid paramedics didn't divulge that secret, citing the ban of the capital healthcare department on contact with the press. In this situation, I wish you good health. Be careful on the roads. All the best, and in a moment, the sports information from Oksana Polonskaya. Hello, briefly about the basic sports events of the day. 3 rounds remain before the end of the World Chess Olympics, occurring currently in Moscow. Today, the world champion, Garry Kasparov, did not play, and the Russian teams played against each other. The game lasted only 30 minutes, which ended with a tie, 2-2. The first women's team of Russia lost heavily to the Hungarian women chess players. The second Russian team defeated the Indian team with a score 3-0. Details in a special chess report around midnight. Now hockey. Today in the International Hockey League Cup, there was only one match held. Salavat Yulayev, with a devastating score, beat Strytel from Kurgandal 13-5. Hopes that the NHL season will begin diminished to microscopic proportions. There's almost no time left for thought. Positions of the owners and players seem to be incompatible. Another proposal of players was again refused by the owners of the teams. The Council of the Team Presidents instructed its representative, Gary Bettman, to announce the closing of the season, which never began, in the event that there is no agreement reached, and the schedule won't permit at least 50 matches. The team of Wayne Gretzky, meanwhile, lost in a final match of the European Tour to the Swedish team Malmo in overtime 5-6. The Chelyabinsk Tractor and the Wayne Gretzky's team, the LA Kings, will play in a tournament in the end of December, and the team of Viktor Tikhanov's, the Army team, will play in Switzerland with secondary teams of the Czech Republic and Switzerland. The current level in the World Slalom Cup was interesting because for the first time it was held late at night under the lights of massive projectors on the famous track since Trier. But everything else was almost as usual. The level was won by Alberto Tombo, who leads in the overall tally. Good evening. Information from the Oceanic Meteorological Center. On the European part of Russia, there will be no significant changes in the weather tomorrow. The cyclone over the north of Scandinavia will influence the weather of the Kola Peninsula, Karelia, Arkhangelsk district, and the Vologda district. Here it will be cloudy with some isolated light snowfall. Temperatures during the day -4 to 7. In the Nenets Autonomous District and the Republic of Komi and the Volgovyatsk area, cloudy with some light snow and possible blizzards. At night, -13 to 18. During the day, -8 to 13. The cyclone over the Baltic Sea will influence the weather in the Baltic countries, Belarus, and the northwestern region. Here it will be cloudy with rain and wet snow. During the day, temperatures around 0. The Leningrad district will have -2 to 5 degrees. The weather of the central and central Chernozem area tomorrow will be influenced by a cyclone, which in the future will shift to the lower Volga. For now, it's cloudy in that area with some light isolated snow. Day temperatures -4 to 7. In the central Chernozem area, 0, -3. On the central and lower Volga in the republics of the Northern Caucasus and on the lower Don tomorrow will be cloudy. Wet snows will pass through. Day temperatures from 0 to +5 degrees. In Moldova and Ukraine, in the zone of an atmospheric front, it's cloudy with some isolated rain and morning fog. Temperature in Ukraine 0 +5, in Moldova +7 to 10. In Georgia, tomorrow it will be cloudy and rainy. In Azerbaijan, partly cloudy skies without precipitation. Temperatures during the day +5 to 10 degrees. In Armenia, snow is possible, -4 to 7 degrees. In Petersburg, tomorrow it will be cloudy with snow. Temperature at night -3 to 5 during the day, -1 to 3. In Moscow, in 2 days, the height of the snow has increased by 20 centimeters. Tomorrow, as previously, it will be snow, but lighter, and it will be somewhat cooler. Temperatures at night -9 to 11. Throughout the suburbs, -13 during the day, -5 to 7. This is the weather promised by forecasters. I wish you success and a good mood. Goodbye.